Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of What's the Tea here at Anew. Welcome to our part 3 episode of our Domestic Violence Awareness Month series, where we dive a little bit further into what domestic violence truly is. So please take a moment and like our video and share on your page, on your social media with all your friends. You never know who might be out there and can really benefit from this information. And so just take a moment, like our video, share. We're celebrating Domestic Violence Awareness Month, hence the purple ribbon behind me. And so we're going to go ahead and dive a little bit deeper into what domestic violence truly is. For those who watched last week's episode, we talked about emotional abuse. Today, we're going to be talking about physical abuse. And so as we know, there are a lot of different types of abuse when you're talking about domestic violence. When people usually hear the term domestic violence, they usually hear or think of bruises, broken bones. But as we've discussed here in our series, there are a lot of different other types of abuse as well under the umbrella of domestic violence. And so I have two very special guests here with me today from Family Shelter Services. And so I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourselves. If you can tell me about yourself, what you do in the agency, and also what your agency has to offer.
There. So I'm Monica Miller. I'm a safe adult advocate with Family Shelter Service. So Family Shelter Services provides sort of a wide range of support to survivors of domestic violence. We have our court advocates. They're located at the DuPage County Courthouse. We have our prevention team. They go out and do presentations for schools, for community members. We also have our community team. They do our hotline, and they also go out into the community. They do trainings. We have our children's team, which are our safe children specialists, and they work with the survivors who have children or children themselves who have experienced abuse. And then there's us. We are the safe adult advocates. So we provide services to adults who have survived domestic abuse. We do counseling, case management, we teach DV education, and we have walk-in hours as well.
I'm Lizbeth. I'm also another safe adult advocate. So like Monica said, we provide all those services. I specifically work with English and Spanish speaking adult victims of domestic violence. But we both see residential and non-residential clients. We provide case management and emotional support to victims of domestic violence.
Okay, wow, that's really interesting. It really sounds like a lot of the DV organizations really offer very similar resources and just help for victims, abusers, for everybody in general. So that's really a good thing because we're leaning towards figuring out what exactly is needed in our communities. And so it's really nice to know that there are different organizations like ours in different communities offering support and help to people. So that's really good. So let's go ahead and dive into our topic today, physical abuse. What is physical abuse? And can you give me some examples of it?
Physical abuse could be the obvious things. It could be the hitting, punching, kicking, the things that leave bruises. But we also talk about in our DV education series how it can expand so much further than that. It could be blocking someone from leaving a room. It could be following someone, tracking on social media. There's lots of different, more subtle forms of physical abuse.
And I like to add in a lot of times, if someone is being threatened by weapons, again, it's them trying, like Monica said, to block them and not let them get out of the house or out of the way. So by using that, also neglecting any physical needs, especially when a person is ill, pregnant, or injured. So that type of stuff.
Physical abuse also doesn't have to directly hit the person. If things are being thrown, threats are being made, that also encompasses physical abuse as well. Also medical abuse, and sexual reproductive abuse, that could be, denying someone access to birth control, refusing to wear condoms, things like that. All of that can be, under the umbrella term of physical abuse.
Wow, there's so many things under the umbrella of physical abuse. I feel like a lot of people might think, okay, so physical abuse is hitting and punching, just physically hurting somebody, but it could be so many more things. So you covered the fact that it's not always that obvious, right? Sometimes it's a little bit more subtle. So can you talk a little bit more about that, about how physical abuse might not be that obvious for the victim. How might a victim be in an abusive relationship where they're being physically abused, but possibly not know it?
We always kind of talk about this when it comes to groups, how this is the whole point of us kind of educating and showing the signs of it, because a lot of times it becomes normal to a person. They don't know what a healthy relationship looks like. So if there's a lot of arguing, it could be, well, we both get into it, or it's just something that I'm used to. So in a way, that's how it can become, and how it's not obvious to someone. Also when it comes to like peers, if do they always know that a friend or someone else is being abused, and not necessarily if the victim also knows how to hide it or how to keep it, a secret, either because they're ashamed or embarrassed, or they just don't want anybody else to know what's going on with them. So no, it's not always obvious.
Normalized in a very large context. A lot of the shows we watch, or the movies we see, books we read, they have these unhealthy dynamics of power and control in relationships. And so when it's happening to you, you say, oh, it's the same that I see on TV. It's normal, it's fine. Or a lot of our clients have grown up in unhealthy households, and so it's been normalized to them from childhood, and so they don't know any different per se. I think a lot of it's also minimizing, denying, and blaming, like, oh, he didn't mean to, or I got in the way, or it wouldn't have happened if I had just taken a step back. Like, a lot of minimizing happens. And so they might not realize how bad it truly is until it gets to that more lethal point.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I like how you mentioned the minimizing, denying, blaming, because that's a really big aspect of these types of situations where a lot of the time they don't realize what's going on because, they don't want to, or it's not that obvious. And then you talked about how peers might not know what's going on either, because most of the time the abuser doesn't want other people to know what's going on, right? Because what they want is power and control. And other people finding out means more support for the victim. And so usually if there's physical abuse, it's going to be somewhere where the clothes is going to cover it because they don't want other people to know. So it's not always that obvious.
Identifying it in friends and family can be a big struggle because, like you said, they try to hide it. They'll wear long sleeves, they'll wear high neck tops, they'll minimize and deny it. They'll say, no, like I just fell, or I'm just so clumsy. We hear that quite a lot. I think for people who are wanting to know how to kind of know when that's happening to a friend or family member, start looking for signs of isolation first. Isolation is one of the silent killers of the DV world. People pulling away from their friends and family. They're not responding to calls or texts. They're canceling plans. If they do go out, they're being called, 100 times by their partner. Where are you? When are you coming home? Show me pictures. So I think, learning the signs, those more subtle signs of abuse, can be helpful in identifying when that's happening to someone we care about.
Yeah, definitely. Isolation is a big one. I would say that that's probably the most common, the one that, usually even happens in the beginning, where it's very subtle type of isolation, but it does start getting more and more gradually getting worse. And so that's definitely something to look out for. And now you're talking, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just we talk about that as red flags for relationships. Those it's sort of normalized at the beginning of this puppy love. Oh, we just want to spend so much time together. I'm so crazy about you. Let's spend every evening together. Let's talk on the phone all day. And it seems cute in the beginning. It's like, oh, that puppy dog romance. But over time, when you start to realize, wow, I haven't talked to my mom in a week, or I haven't reached out to my friends in forever, that's when it starts to creep up on you. And by the time you're so far in, it's harder to break that isolation.
Exactly. Yeah, I can see that. I can see how it could seem really cute. Oh, this person's paying so much attention to me. You kind of like it, of course. That's something you kind of want in a relationship. But once you realize, wait a minute, how did it get to here? Right. Then it becomes a problem. Then it's of course a little bit more difficult to take a step back. Because then the abuser is going to say, well, don't you like this? I thought you agreed to do this, so a lot can come from that as well. And then there's also this honeymoon stage, right? Where they apologize and everything's good. They act like everything's good. It's not going to happen again. You know, I really messed up. And so it could also be this honeymoon stage that's kind of influencing whether they see that they're, you know, in being abused, because most of the time they're in this honeymoon stage.
I talk about that when we in our DV education series, we do the cycle of violence. And I talk about how honestly that hopeful phase might be one of the most dangerous parts. Like the physical abuse is more obvious. That's bad. We know that's bad. But when they cycle back to the hopeful, I love you so much, it'll never happen again, I'll get help. People cling to that hope. Of course, we want our partners to change. Of course, we want it to get better. And so holding on to that hope is sometimes one of the biggest barriers to leaving.
Yeah.
Like we said, you know, at the beginning, that's how you get to know each other. They're this genuine, awesome, nice person. So yeah, the hope that they're gonna be that person again, you know, things are gonna get better.
Exactly. That hope comes from somewhere. You know, the abuse didn't start on the first date. So it does come from somewhere. It comes from that person that they first met, and they have hope to go back to that person that they fell in love with.
Yeah.
So that's very understandable. So let's talk about some of the risk factors. What are some potential risk factors for abuse? What are some things to look out for?
Well, we had said earlier, definitely isolation. Are they keeping in touch with family, with friends, with the community? Especially because they try to use that isolation part for you not to get any help, any support. So how are you going to look out for resources, get the help that you need? Dysfunctional childhood. How was your childhood growing up? Was there trauma? Was there also abuse back then? Mental health issues as well. Is you develop anxiety, you develop maybe depression, PTSD. So all of that definitely come into play when it comes to abuse.
Also, poverty, unfortunately, is a factor. Many of our clients will say, like, I had nothing. Someone swooped in. They said, I'll buy you food. I'll pay for your rent. I'll do all these things. And if you have nothing, of course, you do what you can to survive, and that's okay. And then once they kind of have the survivor under their thumb, that's when they like, now I'm expecting things from you. Now you need to do things for me. You have to do what I say. You have to follow my rules. And so poverty can be an influence in that as well.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And I see that as an obstacle to leaving as well. A lot of people don't want to go to their old lifestyle where they were struggling to pay bills or they didn't have a place to live. And now they do. So they think, okay, so maybe I can manage, maybe I can put up with all this abuse, because now let's say they do have children. Now my children are, living in a safe space. But we're not going to get into all the obstacles of leaving, right? Because we'll talk for another 2 hours.
Yeah. I do think that the financial aspect of that is huge, because I think it does tie into physical, because it's keeping your names off of things. It's taking your wages. I had a client who was forced to direct deposit into her abuser's account. Like it's physical as well in terms of financial.
Yeah. Definitely. And I also wanted to point out that we've got these potential risk factors, right, for abuse, but a lot of these go hand in hand with protective factors as well. So kind of like losing contact with your community. So for those people who keep contact with their community and their neighborhood and get involved in community events or resource fairs and things like that, that can also work as a protective factor. So we don't have just risk factors. I love to mention protective factors because they're really, really important as well.
Absolutely. And breaking the isolation is one of the first things we focus on, and it's never too late. You can either make new friends, you can find, book clubs or hobby groups or anything, or reach out to old friends, because I promise most people will say, hey, it's been a long time, let's catch up.
Yeah.
There's not this sort of grudge that's held. Most people, they get busy with their own lives, they don't even realize how long it's been, and then you reach out, they're like, oh yeah, let's go get coffee.
Oh yeah, that's happened to me before. So let's talk a little bit about the lethality of physical abuse. How does physical abuse affect a person's health in the long term, both mentally and physically?
The physically part, just with having bad injuries, getting checked. A lot of times victims don't want to go to the doctor, either because the abuser doesn't let them, or they're just scared that the bill will come in and they will find out. So we always say it's important to get checked, because a lot of times, yes, bruises may go away, the outside may go away, but what's happening inside, that's important for you to get checked out. Also, when it comes to mentally, so then that leading into, again, like I mentioned earlier, depression or anxiety. If you're not working on those things, how can you feel better? Especially when you have kids. If you're not taking care of yourself, how can you be there for your kids as well? But again, not having that support to go get the resources that you need. If abusers aren't letting you, you're not going to get the help and get that work done.
I have a lot of clients who rely on free services like us because their abuser checks what insurance bills come in. And it's just hard to like get away even to go see a doctor or a mental health provider. Or we talk about sexual health as well. Get checked. STIs are usually fairly treatable in the beginning. And many of our abusers step out on their partner. And so it's good for the partner to continue to get checked as well. If you put those things off, if you put off your physical health, you'll pay the price later, it'll add up. So if it's possible at all to, come to an advocate like us, we can help connect with medical providers and find places that might be able to either do a sliding scale or just avoid the abuser knowing what's going on.
Yeah, so I hear you mention a good resource. Did you say it was HUDs?
I'm sorry?
Monica? You mentioned a good resource. You said some people use this resource because their abuser will look at the medical bills.
Right.
I don't think I'm familiar with that.
Well, more for like mental health. So our parent company, Metropolitan Family Services, can do either like a insurance, or there's a few sliding scale scholarships available. And so those typically, they try to reserve those for DV survivors who, if their partner sees their insurance, something bad might happen. And so I think Howard Brown Health might also have sliding scale for mental health, things like that.
Okay, yeah, so that's really good to know and to put out there, is that there are other options. So definitely if you call one of our organizations, we'll have the information for you. Yeah. Awesome. So let's go into sexual abuse, because that's also a part of physical abuse. And I've found that a lot of people do get surprised when, or even victims themselves don't really know that they're being sexually abused because they've already gave consent in the past, or they're in a relationship where they've been together with this person before, or they've been together a long time, or they're married. Okay, so they maybe believe that because I agreed to marry this person, it's impossible to be sexually abused by this person. So can you just talk a little bit about that?
I think it's really important for everyone to know that consent is ongoing. Just because you consented to something in the past doesn't mean it's a given in the future. Just because you consented to one thing doesn't mean you're consenting to other things. Partners must give and receive consent constantly in a relationship, whether this is your first date, whether you've been married for 50 years, consent always needs to be asked for. I think, unfortunately, it's only very recently, within the past, I'd say 40 or 50 years, that marital rape was actually a crime. Before that, like, people they didn't count it because, oh, you're married, you have to. But that's absolutely not the case. Everyone has the right to their own body. You can say no. You can say no at any point too. It doesn't have to be before you're getting intimate. I don't care if you're in the middle of an intimate act. You can stop. You can say, no, I'm not feeling this anymore. And a partner must step away. As soon as consent is revoked, everything needs to stop.
Communication is a big part of it, and that's one thing, like Monica said. Yeah, we were doing this for a long time, but I don't feel comfortable anymore. I don't want to do that anymore. So you have the right to say, no, I don't want to do that anymore. Just communicating with your partner.
And there's no such thing as implied consent. I don't care what you're wearing. I don't care if you were flirting. Like, there's no such thing as implied consent. And there's no like right within a relationship. There's no marital rights. You still have the right to say no.
Exactly. Yeah, very, very well spoken. I definitely agree with everything you just said. So let's talk about how physical abuse could actually be a barrier to leaving. How might that be?
So some abusers will ingrain so deeply the need for secrecy and then put physical marks on more obvious places, which would then keep the person home. Or they might physically stop someone from leaving. They might take away car keys. They might block the exit. They could step in, physically to stop someone from leaving. I think the barrier also becomes a little bit emotional there too. We hear a lot of like guilt tripping, threats. If you leave, I will hurt you. I will hurt myself. I will hurt your family. So there's sort of a lot of fear that goes along, because physical violence and fear kind of go hand in hand. It's not necessarily that physical violence is always happening day to day. It's that fear of what could happen. So if I do leave, then could my partner harm someone? Could they harm themselves? Could they? We even had someone who their partner threatened to harm their dog, and that prevented them from leaving.
Children come into play a lot as well. You leave, I will take the kids away. I will get full custody. A lot of times we don't always know our rights, so that's definitely a fear that what am I going to do if he does take or she takes my kids away? So using the children is another barrier, very, very much.
Immigration status. If you leave, I'll report you to ICE. I will take away your papers. I will cancel your visa, whatever it is.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of fears out there for leaving. And a lot of them are not, that obvious where other people can just notice what's going on. I have heard, I like that you mentioned immigration, because I've heard of people, I've even heard of a situation where the victim had no idea she had a visa. Okay, so the abuser was actually not allowing her to travel, not allowing her to see her family, and tricking her into thinking that she didn't have a visa. And so finally she ends up finding it and realizing what's going on in her situation. So there might be a lot of situations out there like that, unfortunately.
And also, if any of our watchers are, in that kind of situation, there are options to maintain legal status without the abuser. There's the U visa. There's ways to maintain papers without relying on the abuser. So I hope they can reach out to like legal resources so that's no longer a barrier.
Yes, there is help out there. There's a lot of information that we can offer you as well. So tell me a little bit about the complexity and difficulties that COVID has brought to domestic violence. So for example, many abusers are now working from home. Have you noticed, or do you think that this complicates things for the survivor?
Absolutely. Yeah. I have clients who their abusers are home 24/7. Everyone always asks, did we see an uptick in clients because of COVID? And I would say honestly, no, because it was harder for them to reach out. I've had several clients, they call me from their car on lunch break at work. They call me when they're out walking the dog. They just find any excuse to go out because their abuser is home all the time.
And it's important. I mean, when they're home, they're going to suspect things or question things. So I've had, like Monica said, clients where they're working and in the car, and sometimes if they take a little bit too long, where were you? Or I thought you were doing this. So they definitely keep an eye out, and it's hard for them.
And being together 24/7, there's more opportunity for the abuser to press their power and control. Yeah. They'll pick fights. They'll, do whatever. Like, there's just more episodes of abuse that happen because you're with each other so much.
That's because they're here with me, I can't talk right now. So that when they need that help in that moment or want to talk to someone, they can't even do that. So maybe wait a few more days or wait another week. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, so having the abuser in the house 24/7, I can definitely see how that's going to impact the survivor's ability to just reach out and get help. And it might even be harder to leave a relationship. And I know we're going to go into that. That's one of our next questions, is like, what kind of advice would you give people if they want to leave a relationship? But this might make it even difficult, because usually what we tell somebody is like, you have to find a time. You have to actually strategize and find a time to leave the relationship where you think is safest. But having the perpetrator, the abuser, in the house with you 24/7, how are you going to find this time? There's no time there's no hour where he or she goes to work. They're home all the time. So it could be a lot more difficult to just leave the relationship if someone is, wanting to do that.
Absolutely. I think our number one piece of advice is safety plan, safety plan, safety plan. And during COVID, when the abuser's home, that safety plan is going to just have to look a little bit differently. It might be, more of a longer term plan, like you put, a piece of clothes with your friends, you scan your documents, like you do little tiny things here and there so that when you're able to leave, you have things ready to go. Obviously, there's sort of the two different types of leaving. There's the emergency, I have to leave now, my life is depending on it. And so there's less planning time. But we encourage people who are in abusive relationships to kind of have a safety plan in the back of your mind, even if you think things are going to work out with the abuser, even if you think it's going to be fine, just have something, have papers scanned, like, birth certificate, social security card, things like that, have clothes ready to go. If you can leave them at your office, at your friend's house. But we really want a safety plan in place because leaving is the most lethal time for a survivor of domestic abuse. Usually the abuser at least has that some level of honeymoon period where they're trying to win the survivor over. If you're leaving, they're just going all out, like do anything to make the survivor stay. And oftentimes that turns very lethal.
Yeah. Yeah. What I've learned is that that's actually the most dangerous time is when a victim wants to leave. So that's the importance of definitely emphasizing the safety plan. And, you can call our organizations and we can help you strategize these types of things, but really nobody knows your situation better than, the person who's in the situation, because every situation is different. So I really like that you mentioned that. Let's talk about what are some, go ahead.
I was going to say, make a plan for every eventuality. I think I have several clients who are like, oh, I'll just go to a hotel. Okay, what if the hotel's booked? Or what if you can't get there? Have an A, a B, a Z, like have everything you can to just in case something goes wrong.
And look at it, here and there. I mean, a lot of times, like Monica said, if it's an emergency, I get it that you have to leave right away. But if you think you kind of have a date or like, okay, by this time I think I'll be ready, but look at it weekly, daily. What things do I need to change, or what do I need to add in? So
involve the kids and the pets. Like I said, we had a survivor who actually ended up going back to their abuser because they threatened their pet. Have some place to take the dogs. Have a plan with the kids. A lot of our clients will have code words with the kids. So if mom says this, that means you got to go. So just plan, for every aspect.
I like the idea of using code words with the kids. That's definitely a really good advice.
Make it something that's easy to slip into a conversation, but it's not like an everyday thing. So like if mom says, oh, we forgot our dentist appointment, that doesn't stand out so much that the abuser might know what's going on, but how often do you forget your dentist appointment? So it's like it tells the kids something's wrong, we have to go, but it doesn't alert the abusers what's going on.
Wow, that's amazing. That's a really good idea. We forgot our dentist appointment. It gets you a reason to leave the house as well. So yeah, so I'm learning a lot from you all today as well. So tell us, what are some signs to look out for if you think that your friend maybe is being abused? What kinds of things can you look out for?
What they're wearing, a lot of times, especially if it's warm weather out. I mean, we do like to wear long sleeves, but how are they wearing that? Are they wearing sweaters? Is it too hot for them to take it off? Because then they'll be hiding the bruising. Are they keeping in touch again? So are they making up excuses of not meeting for girlfriend's date or family events? Are they making up excuses for the abuser, that why they couldn't attend, or they had a work meeting on a Saturday or anything like that?
Yeah.
I think, just sort of keeping in touch with people. If you think that someone is maybe going through a hard time, like reaching out and just, it's easy to say, like, what do you need? But maybe like be more specific, like, hey, do you need X, Y, or Z? Like, do you need these things? And that'll at least give the person the open door to like reach out if they need it. I think isolation really is the biggest thing to look out for. So just making sure that that person knows, hey, I'm here if you need me. I have a spare room, or I can supply some money, or whatever it is. Be as specific as possible, but just show how you're able to support, and that might help the survivor open up a little bit about what's going on.
Great. Yeah, you went right into my next question. Is like how can you help somebody? So definitely just by being there, offering your support and maintaining that communication.
I think, getting educated as well. Like we have community programs. We can help friends and family of survivors to learn about DV and to learn about strategies for support. Making sure that the survivor knows that they're not alone. It's normal. It's okay.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of maybe casual judgment that accidentally happens in the terms of like family and friends who worry about a survivor and never ask, why didn't you just leave? Never ask, those kinds of questions. Just be like, hey, I'm here to support you. I've got a spare room for you, or I can, give you a ride somewhere, or you can store stuff at my house. Just being, upfront about what you can provide.
Definitely.
Believing them, a lot of the judging. I mean, again, a lot of times we have to be maybe neutral between two parties, but if the victim is needing support, like being able to believe them and letting them know, like Monica said, any support that I can give you, doesn't matter if you go back to that abuser, I am here for you no matter what, as many times that you need it. So,
and I think that's where people get frustrated.
Yeah.
On average, it takes a survivor 7 attempts to leave.
yeah,
And I think that can get very frustrating for friends and family because, like, okay, I helped you leave and then you went back. Just bear with them. They're doing the best that they can. Just always have that spare room for them. Always have, a ride available for them. Just continue to be available throughout the leaving journey because it might take multiple attempts.
Yeah, it can be hard. I can definitely see how it can be hard when you gave your all to help this person only to see them, fall into this abuse again. But, it's a process and it's not that easy. And so it's definitely important to understand without judging. And I like how you mentioned, Lizbeth, believing them, right? Don't ask for proof, just believe them that what happened is what happened. Because, we've seen that happen sometimes where sometimes it's just it's emotional abuse where it's not that easy to prove. And maybe some people don't believe them.
yeah.
Okay, so no matter what, it's definitely important to believe them and just basically just support them and be there for them because they'll know when they're ready. Yeah, so I've just about covered all my questions that I had for you. I really enjoyed all the answers that you gave. You both have so much knowledge. I learned a lot from you today as well. So if there's anything else that you want to share here today.
I think, just remember that abuse is very multi-layered. It's not going to be the obvious things that people think of. It's not always pure physical abuse. Even the physical abuse is not always just like hitting and kicking. It's so multi-layered. The emotional side is absolutely huge. And it sounds like you covered that last week, which is wonderful. It's not as easy as just, leave. There's so many, if you have kids, you loved this person at some point. It's you're grieving the loss of the relationship. Like it's so multidimensional. And so it takes, for friends and family who are, kind of on the peripheral of that, it takes patience, it takes support. For the person going through it, it's going to take therapy, it's going to take resources. Like there's a lot of things that go into all of this. And so please just remember how multifaceted it is. It's not just a leave and you're done. There's post-separation abuse. Abusers often abuse the court system. They'll drag out divorce cases and custody cases. Like it's not simple. Nothing about this is simple.
Yeah, and that's why these resources are available because you are not alone. We understand that it's difficult and it isn't simple. And so that's why we offer so many different types of resources for these type of situations.
And please reach out. There's the national hotline. I think we have a hotline. Maybe your agency has a hotline. Like, even if you're just suspecting abuse and you need someone to talk about it, if you feel like, you're not ready to leave, but maybe you just want to gather some information, like wherever you are on your journey, please reach out. We are here to support. We can help. We work with clients who are still in the relationship, who are leaving the relationship, who have already left the relationship. Anywhere you are on your journey, we were able to support with that.
Yes. Well, thank you, Monica. Thank you, Lizbeth, for being here. I really enjoyed this tea with you all. And thank you all for watching.
Very much. It was nice to meet you.
Yeah, no problem. So next week, we're going to go on with our Domestic Violence Awareness Month series. We're going to be talking about financial and property abuse next week. And then the week after that, we're actually going to have a survivor as one of our guest speakers. And so we're going to talk about the resilience with survivors and how it is that folks can go ahead and find their resilience and work their way out of a situation like this. And so stay tuned. Next week, it'll be at the same time, same place, different tea. Thank you all for watching.
Thank you.